Great. Well, welcome everyone to our second part of our presentation and explanation of how to intervene this time with the bullying dynamic. I'm Gosztonyi. I'm one of the coordinators of the Center of Excellence for Behavior Management, and I've been a school psychologist for many years. This area, talking about bullying, is something I've been very, very interested in. But as you saw in the first part, there's a lot more to that picture. And I have with me my colleague and co-coordinator, Catherine Cora. Do you want to say hi, Catherine?
Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Great. So as we go along, those of you that are watching live here, you can put your questions into the chat. All right. So without further ado, let us launch into intervening with the bully dynamic. Now, again, I wish I could tell you that what I'm going to share with you will solve all your problems. But I think most of you have already figured out that because we're dealing with such a complex dynamic here, that there are no simple interventions. And part of me feels really badly because, of course, I like to make things better for people in the world, and I'd love to be able to give you the simple answers so that nobody gets hurt, because that's the hardest part, I think, of watching a bully in action, is when you see how much it hurts the child who's the object of that particular person's sense of not caring and alpha complex and dominance and what have you. And it really breaks our heart. And of course, we try very hard in our school system to make sure that doesn't happen. But when we understand all of the pieces that go into developing the bully personality, then we really understand that it isn't going to be easy to undo. And we've got here sort of 12 characteristics that are ingrained within that particular dynamic. And if these have been deeply, deeply ingrained, it isn't going to be that easy to undo them. And so we are, and we know that there are good reasons for that. There's the alpha complex. Again, Dr. Neufeld's whole the power of his explanation is what he's saying is that bullying comes from natural instincts that we all have, which are alpha instincts, which are to take care of people, but they can go awry. And then, of course, as all of us as human beings, when things become too difficult for us, we can become defended against caring and responsibility. And when those two things kind of blend together, when they come together, it creates the perfect storm that causes all of these things. So you have a child who is unreceptive to being taught, highly resistant to being coerced. They don't like to be told what to do. They seem to be fearless and tearless. They don't seem to be able to think. On the other hand, this is a mean thing to say that might hurt somebody. No, I need to say it. So they don't have that tempering element. They have a sense that they have a right to whatever they want to do, this attitude of entitlement, highly sensitized to slight. They get very upset by some things that we would say, why did you react like that? Well, they have their reasons for that. And again, if you haven't listened to part one, please go back and listen. Predisposed to aggression, and they have this distorted attachment behavior. And so when alpha complex and defended against caring and responsibility come together, now we have our bully instinct, and then it can get entrenched in a bully syndrome. And when we looked at the making of bullies, we looked very much in depth at the conditions that give rise to that. And the alpha complex, what we mean by that is that you're stuck in your alpha instincts. They aren't moving in the appropriate way in which they should. We don't mind when a child or a student, an adolescent, wants to be in charge of things. We love those kinds of kids, but they also have to know when they're no longer the ones in charge. And of course, you can become alpha by default or by defense. And then sort of parallel to that comes the sense of being overwhelmed, where you put kind of the shell around your heart. You become defended against the two big things that actually temper our natural alpha instincts to be in charge, which are caring and responsibility. And if the child has been too wounded, if there's been too much separation to bear, then they put on that shell, and now you end up with this bully instinct and the bully syndrome. And the characteristics of that, and these are important for us to know because this is what we're going to work with. Dependence is an adversive state. They don't feel that the adults are really in the proper alpha role. And again, can kind of go back and forth because we can try to take care of them, but sometimes they find it hard. But it's really up to us to make sure that we get back into that alpha role. There aren't proper attachment hierarchies, and they tend to be oriented towards the other immature. And of course, that causes all sorts of problems as well. So what we're going to be looking at here is really trying to figure out how we can unmake the bully. So how we can undo the characteristics that they've gotten entrenched in and work on reversing the conditions that give rise to the bullying. And this is why I can't give you a simple answer. This is why when I'm gonna name all sorts of things, and some of you are going to think, well, we can't do that. That's way too much for us. And again, I know that this is a very, very difficult dynamic to work with, but I guess part of it is where are we going to put our energy? And you're going to see in a moment, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what really does not work. And we have a tendency in education to put a lot of energy into things that actually aren't going to make a difference, because what we're wanting to do is to really change this aversive state, change our alpha roles, create natural hierarchies, diminish peer orientation, take away all the things that are hurtful, and then basically soften the heart of the bully. And when the bully's heart is softened, then the bullying behavior is less likely to emerge. So I'm going to do a quick tour through what doesn't work and why. First of all, battling against the instinct and the symptom behavior. And it's really important for us to remember that, in effect, we are looking at the tip of the iceberg when we're looking at the bully behavior. And where does that come from? Well, there's all what is underneath: the severe attachment problems and the severe vulnerability problems. And these are fueling the behavior, because the behavior is an attempt of the bully to manage a world that is really not manageable. And so they try to do something. So now we, in our wisdom, and again, I'm going to qualify this a little bit. We figure, well, we're just going to have to do something and make sure the bully knows this is unacceptable behavior, which is what we do. We have laws. Different school boards have laws. I know that we have one in Quebec. We have a Ministry of Education regulation that requires us to impose certain consequences when bullying is uncovered. But one of the things that we know is that bullying, unfortunately, isn't always easy to uncover. So why are consequences, or some kind of a reaction to that? Why do they not work? Well, they don't work, and we'll look at that in a moment, but there is a bit of a dilemma. So let's just look at what happens. Well, when you put a consequence on, it actually can fuel the problem that the bully is experiencing. Because first of all, remember, this is a person who's taking care of themselves. They have felt, for whatever reason in their life, people cannot take care of me. That is why they're stuck in alpha. And now basically when we're saying to them, well, you're not allowed to do that, they're going to look back at us and you can't tell me what to do. So a consequence does not actually speak to a bully. And because they are defended against caring and responsibility, they're not able to feel the sadness of the fact that the consequence is supposed to stop them. So it just fuels this syndrome. It gets them stuck in that syndrome. What often happens, and this is one of the things that is kind of an interesting characteristic of the bully syndrome, is that these I'm talking about kids, but we all know there are even adults that are involved in this. They do figure out how not to do it someplace where they're going to get a consequence, but then they find another place to get it out, another place in which they are able to show to people, I'm in charge. You can't push me around. I'm basically going to rule the world, and I'm going to make sure that no one takes advantage of me. So they find another place to do it, and we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But there is another issue here, and is that if we don't do anything about the bullying, if we don't take a stand, a public stand about bullying, then basically the people around the bully start to want to take things into their own hands. So they basically, it can erode the sense of social justice, can even erode a sense of values, undermine our alpha posture at the school in terms of we're in charge, and also inadvertently convey a lack of support for those that have been violated by the bully. So we do need to put consequences in, state that we're going to do something about it, but truly understand that will not change the bully. We have to do other things to actually get to the bully. Now, in people have said, well, it's because the bully doesn't understand that this hurts someone else. And Dr. Neufeld, when he talks about his experience in the juvenile system, he said they used to, they used to do sensitivity training with the juvenile delinquents who were terrible bullies. He said what they found out was now they got to be smarter bullies. Now they really knew how to push people's buttons. Standing up and saying no. And again, we talk a lot about being a good witness, about standing up. But there's two things about this. First of all, if we do stand up and say no, we can inadvertently then, get the wrath of the bully upon us. So the child now can become the bully's victim because the bully basically says, you can't say no to me. Um, or the other thing is that yes, we could say no. And honestly, if I were a parent of a child who was bullied, I would want them to stand up to the bully because the bully will look for somebody else that is easier to bully. But what we need to remember is that that does not change the bully and someone else is going to become a victim. So as a school system, we need to realize that again, just telling the bully to stop isn't going to actually stop the behavior. It just means the behavior is going to go somewhere else. And then conveying hurt feelings. Oh my goodness, this works well if you have a caring heart and somebody says, oh, I don't like that name. You can, oh, I'm sorry, but for the bully, that just fuels them. They know exactly now how to upset you. I remember one little guy that I knew, he was very, very sensitive about the fact that his mother was not taking proper care of him. And kids around him would bully him by simply just saying the word mother. And that was enough to make this kid explode. So them knowing what his vulnerability was actually made the bullying worse. Well, what does work? So we do have to look at and just make sure that we don't put too much focus on student to student interaction. Yes, of course, we want to help students get along with each other and be nice to each other and have social responsibility and do our social emotional learning programs. But that is not what is going to actually get to the heart of the matter. We can't have bullies and victims trying to sort problems out. And one of the other things we do sometimes as well is we put kids together to problem solve. And if it's two friends who need to solve a problem, it usually they take a little while and they get it sorted out. Often the bully will intimidate the victim and the victim comes out and says, everything's fine, but it's not. When we want to do our interventions, we really want to focus on getting both the children that are involved in the bullying or the ones that are involved in being bullied to create relationships with adults. So Dr. Newfound again just says to us, we need to, in terms of to unmake the bully, provide for safe and constructive expression. Make it safe to depend. Make it safe to feel. And immediately you can start to see that this is work that needs to be done individually with the bully, one-on-one, adults taking care of the bully, and not necessarily something that is easy to do, easy to find time for. So I am going to give you a list of things that we can try to do, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge. The thing is that these are things that are more likely to bear fruit than some of the other interventions that we often focus on. So we want to try and find ways in which to embed the bully, so the child who is in this particular dynamic, embed them in some kind of a natural hierarchy to show them that it is safe to depend. You can come to adults, we'll take care of you, we'll figure things out, and to maintain that orientation towards the adults. And in order to do that, we also have to soften the bully's heart, which means that we really need to be the one that steps in. We need to see this student as being somebody that needs us even more than the other students. And that's not easy to do because they really, really push us away very often. Ultimate resolution for working with a bully is actually to get them to tears. Not an easy thing to do. So just some general overall sort of guidelines is that we want to take the lead. We want to support the victim, and we do want to adopt the bully. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we can do to sort of create the conditions in which it might be less likely for a child to fall into the bully dynamic or get stuck into the bully dynamic. So we want to embed them in natural attachment hierarchies. Just a little side note right now is that as I was thinking this through, and just thinking about what we've been living now in terms of this pandemic in the year 2022, and we're getting to our second year of the pandemic, the natural hierarchies have been disrupted. I heard somebody saying in terms of their school staff, oh my goodness, we've got to get our kids back. And this is exactly one of the problems. And if any of you have noticed that maybe there's been an increase in bullying kinds of behavior, it might well be simply because we haven't been able in our schools to continuously maintain that strong alpha presence, that strong hierarchy. Ways in which we can create these hierarchies is to create relationships, even relationships between children of different ages. But again, because of what's happened in the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that. We want to make the bully with those in need. Some of the bullies do very well when they take care of younger children, something we haven't been able to do lately. Sometimes we need to give legitimate room for the alpha instincts to take expression. Put them in charge of something, have them act as a resource. Again, not easy to do when we're having to keep children in their age groups. But some of the things that I'm recommending here are things that we're going to need to hold with us over time as the years go on, when things get back into a more normal rhythm. These are the kinds of things, and I'm going to show you specifically what schools can actually do in that. But these are the kinds of directions that we want to go in. Allow the person who is alpha to express those alpha instincts. Then we want to be the one who cares for the student. And as I say, this is not easy to do. These children hurt other children. We don't like them very much, but they need us even more. So we need to take charge. Sometimes invite the inevitable. Sometimes if they want to have the last word, we let them have the last word, but we let them have the last word rather than just giving in to them. Reading the bully's needs and taking the lead and being the answer. Sometimes they do need something. These are often students that when they're not doing well academically won't ask for help. They won't ask for help. There's many, many ways in which they feel as if nobody wants to take care of them. I often just talk about the simple act of giving a child or giving a student a pencil. With these kinds of kids, we need to be even more sensitive and often give more. At first, they're going to look at us like, what are you trying to do? But actually, it makes a difference to them. They start to sense that people care, that people notice. And so we need to assume, like, find ways in which we can be the caregiver, the protector, the advocate, hold on to them. Sometimes we can win the alpha challenges. We can say, no, this is not the way it is. And sometimes the bully will fall a little bit into the dependent position. And sometimes we know there are certain power struggles we will not be able to win. And it's not that we back down from the peril struggle, is that we decide not to engage in that particular struggle because we have a long-term plan in mind. And we really want to be the bully's answer. Let me help you. Again, that's where things like after school programs, choirs, bands, those kinds of things are often very good places to pull a child in because there's a natural hierarchy there. So hopefully we'll get back to being able to do those kinds of things in our schools. When we see someone whose heart is really hardened, we need to find some ways of keeping them as safe as we can to reduce their wounding. And it's difficult because often the wounding does come from outside of the school. The wounding does come from home. It does come from the circumstances that the student finds themselves in. So it's not easy for us to find ways of doing that. But again, many of you that work as behavior technicians, as guidance counselors, this is what you do. You take this person under their wing and you make them feel safe with you. We're also very careful that we try not to use too many consequences with these kids. We use the consequences in public, But when we're one-on-one with them, we have to find another way to deal with them, because the more consequences we put on them, the more their heart is going to harden, and the harder it will be for us to get through. We want to keep and shield them with this safe, emotional connection, so that ultimately, as I mentioned before, we can help them to find their tears. It's amazing when a bully softens. They can actually become some of our best allies in a school. They can help us to figure out how to help some of the other kids. So keeping children safe is really what we want to be doing, because it is these safe emotional connections that are the most important uh, factor in keeping our children feeling safe. When we focus too much on anti-bullying programs, I know that Pink Shirt Day is coming right now. I don't have anything against Pink Shirt Day other than the fact that it doesn't resolve anything at all. What worries me about something like the Pink Shirt Day is people can spend days and weeks and months and all sorts of resources on making Pink Shirt Day the best day possible. Then they get really exhausted after that, and they don't have time to create a relationship with the kids who really need them the most. It's not a question about whether you can or can't do something. It's a question of how much of your time and energy does it take? And is it going to have the benefits that you want? Social responsibility programs don't cure the bully. Even social emotional learning programs don't cure the bully. What cures the bully, what helps the bully kind of find a way through, are student adult relationships. And that should be our first priority. Now, the victims. This is very interesting because we don't we often, and we feel very sorry for the victim, and we're going to interact with them, and we're going to do what we can to help them. But there's two parts to this whole process. One part is that once the child comes to us with something that seems like bullying, and this is what victims have said out loud. I remember going to a conference once, and the young woman said, it took me forever to get people to realize that this was bullying that was happening to me. And when they finally did realize it, then they went rushing off to try and fix the bully. And actually what she said was, I just wanted them to listen to me. So as I went through this, these are the kinds of things that I think we need to do, because the child who's being victimized, being picked on, actually needs our emotional support. And it's really hard because some of these kids, well, first of all, they do get picked on a lot. So they do need to complain an awful lot. And we get really tired of it, and we think, oh, come on, solve your own problems. It can't be that bad. Well, if it sometimes it is that bad, and so we need to listen to them every time, and we need to validate the experience. Now, even sometimes we might not see it as bullying, but it might feel like bullying to them, and so we've got to really, constantly come alongside. That hurt your feelings. That really hurt. Oh, that's so frustrating. You can't get him to stop. It just seems so unfair because it's always picking on you. Oh, you really wanted them to like you. Oh, that makes you so sad. And again, some of the things that we need to understand is some of the children, not all of them, but some of them who get picked on, sometimes it is as much about how they see the world as how the world is happening. Other kids might be able to handle some of the teasing that they can't handle. But we need to go to where they are, and they need to feel listened to. And ultimately, they actually need to find their sadness and their tears. And it's so interesting because we have so little understanding about how incredibly important sadness and tears are. Yet again, I heard just recently somebody saying, I'm so worried about my child because he's worried about going back to school, and he's been crying at home because he's scared about going back to school." And I'm thinking, whoa, this little guy is dealing emotionally with a very difficult situation, exactly the way that should happen. Dr. Neufeld was actually doing an interview with parents whose children had committed suicide because of bullying, and one parent whose child was still there. And the interviewer was very worried about that child because that child was talking emotionally and feeling sad. And she said to Dr. Neufeld, "Well, aren't you worried about that child?" And he said, "No, as long as she is talking about her emotions to an adult, I am not worried about her." But we have to be so careful as adults to keep honoring that. And it's exhausting. But actually, the tears will often allow the child to find another way through. Some of our kids, as you remember, are somewhat defended themselves emotionally. They don't notice when they're getting into trouble. They have a little bit of difficulty with that as well. So we need to take charge of them to make sure that we help them find a way to be safe. So we need to help them to find safe places with safe adults or older students throughout the day. In high school, particularly, many of the high schools have created an oasis. They've created a play area, like a ping pong area where there are adults. So kids who are being picked on can go there and know that an adult will at least keep them safe in that moment in time. Some of the kids, especially in high school, we have to keep them out of the hallways because they experience something that we call serial bullying. No one child is bullying that child, but every child who walks by this kid will tisk or roll their eyes. And then the kid complains about the last kid who just said, oh, you're dumb or something, something silly, some silly innocuous, what looks innocuous to us, but it was the buildup of all those things. So we have to notice and try and keep these kids safe as well. Help them to develop dignified ways of asking for help and protection from school personnel. Code words that we say, all of the people in the school. If this kid comes to you and says, I need to be with you, you let them be with you because it's getting overwhelming for them. Kids often don't come to us because what they're afraid about is if they tell us that we're going to go and do something about it and it's just going to make things worse. These kids know, they know, and so they don't want us. I mean, I've heard stories where the adults have basically burst out of the office. The child who's being victimized is in the office. They burst out of the office. Everyone can see that the kid is there, and they go after the kid who's bullying right in front of them, and the kid who's bullying says, oh, I know who ratted on me. Kids won't come to us because they're afraid of that dynamic. So we have to assure them, don't worry, I'm going to act behind the scenes. And I'm going to show you in a moment an intervention that actually does that kind of work. Then we need to sometimes give them some responses to keep them safe. So we don't want, I would not recommend standing up to the bully. Maybe a parent might want to do that, but again, remembering that it could backfire on the kid, but it also just moves it away. So that's not necessarily going to be that helpful, but there are ways of getting out of painful situations. Oh, I got to go to the bathroom, although bathrooms are not always a safe place to go. Learning to say things like, oh, you're so dumb, you can't even read. Oh, thank you. That's interesting. Thank you for letting me know. Words that the kid can say that basically save face and get out of there. Just teaching them to shrug their shoulders. I remember there was one intervener, a psychologist who worked with children who had facial disfigurement, and he helped them kind of put a bubble around themselves until they could get out of the situation. Again, we're not telling them it doesn't hurt. We're just telling them, you want to get out of there, here's some ways of getting out of there. I have to go right now. Like just giving them some words of things that they can do that allow them to kind of get out of the situation. You don't have to stay there. Remind them of where to go, how to stay out of the bully's way, remind them of who they can go and see to help them do that. So these are kinds of things that we can do to help these children until we can work behind the scenes and work with the bully. In terms of the bully, really it is about adopting the bully. Again, this can be a little bit tricky when it's one of the full-blown situations where you've already reported it and it goes through the whole system. But we all know there are kids that we can't yet report, that we sense, okay, these are kids that are causing trouble behind the scenes. So this is where our safe school teams are really important. So we have a team meeting. We identify some of the kids that we think are the ones of concern. And there are also, by the way, a group of students that get involved in bullying that are sometimes what we call the puppet master. In other words, you could never catch them, but we know they're behind the scene. Well, we know that. And I'm going to show you in a moment, just remind you of some of the characteristics. But I'll say just trust your gut. If you kind of know that this is the kid who's behind all of it, then identify them, because what we want to do is prioritize them for preventative interventions. But we're not going to tell them why we're intervening. We're going to work behind the scenes. And remember, the pattern of bullying are kids that are defended against feelings, certain feelings of vulnerability, feelings of loss, feeling they're not needy, they're no longer embarrassed, they're no longer shy, they don't have any shame, by the way, which often looks like they have great self-esteem. but that's not about it at all. They don't feel their sadness anymore. They don't feel anxiety. They definitely don't feel caring. They don't feel senses of responsibility. You know, if you say, I'm wondering if this kid is the puppet master, just check. People will know. Oh yeah, okay. And by the way, some of them, especially the females, are very good at looking very nice, but all of you know when a nice kid isn't letting you in. So in terms of adopting the bully, we really need to assign a mentor. That mentor needs to find a way to go to collect and to connect. Stephen Edwards, who was running a big high school, said he knew that there was a huge problem with bullying there. In fact, a problem with gangs, and they identified 10 kids in the school that actually avoided any kind of relationship with adults. And he imposed this thing called 2 by 10. He said, okay, Catherine, you're going to go and collect Kevin. And for 10 days, you're going to say hello to Kevin. And he said 2 by 10 because it's 2 minutes over 10 times. But at first, you can't even spend 2 minutes with the kid. What they found was after the fourth time that you just said, oh, hi, Kevin, so nice to see you, and walked away, by the fourth or fifth time, the kid would be looking to see if you were coming. So amazingly powerful. So you do something to collect. You find things that are similar. You use maybe their alpha instincts. Oh, listen, I need somebody to help me move stuff around. Oh, could you come, Kevin? Could you come with me? I need you. I need someone to help me. And so you just act as if you really need that person's help. Again, trying to engage the alpha instincts. You do sometimes need to keep them out of tempting situations. These are kids that we hold back. We don't let them to go into the hallways. We keep them busy over the lunch hour. We find ways as well to put them into natural hierarchies. I had a situation that was very difficult one year. I was pulled into a school where a young girl was being terribly bullied by a whole group of girls, and there was a big long story to it. Long story short, it was getting to the end of the year, and they said, "What are we going to do next year? This girl is reacting so much; she's actually getting sick." I said, "Well, these kids are going into grade 6. What we should be doing, and again, not necessarily possible right now, but I said, what you need to be doing next year is during every break, during every lunchtime, assign these grade 6 girls some responsibilities. Have them work with the K4s, have them help with the K5s, have them help in the kindergarten, have them help with the milk program. Basically, divide and conquer and put them into natural hierarchies so that they're working with the kindergarten teacher, they're working with the lunch monitor, they're working with someone. They have less chance to engage in that kind of behavior. We're using their alpha instincts, and maybe they also have a chance to develop a positive relationship with an adult where they can talk about maybe the unfairness of some of the things that are happening in their lives. The life of a grade 6 girl is really tough. Can we create hierarchical relationships in our schools? Again, this is long-term planning, not necessarily for this year, but things like Fun Fridays. All the adults in the school share a skill that they enjoy, and the students can sign up or learn or participate in the activity, or sometimes you can even get the older children to teach. This would be another wonderful way of pulling some of these kids in. Do they have a skill that they could share with somebody young? If you can't do that right now, taking care of plants actually can be very helpful. There was a whole school that had a program with these really tough kids, these kids that were always getting into trouble, where they were assigned to taking care of plants. Again, there was an adult that was there. It was amazing the conversations these kids had with the adults when they were watering the plants. Some of these kinds of things can actually seem quite magical. The kids then would talk about how unfair life was, how mean other people were to them, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the ideal world, bringing elders or older people into the school, doing things like knitting the generations, where again, we're setting up natural hierarchies and helping kids. So we need to think about, are there some that we can develop, maybe not for this year, maybe not until the pandemic is over, where we can keep building these student adult relationships. And then the other thing we need to think about is these kids, these students who don't naturally seek out adults, what can we do to go and engage them? Because remember, often the interaction with these kids is around telling them to stop doing what their instincts are telling them to do. We need to work behind the scenes. We can't always be confronting them about stuff. So ultimately, what we're looking at here is we're trying to create a situation in which the adults become more important. The adults matter more than the opinions of other people. And when we can do that, our kids are what we call in right relationship. Now, I just want to spend a few moments because I do want to make sure that we have time to answer some of your questions. I just want to share very quickly, and I think what I'm going to do is actually do a whole hour-long presentation on how to do this. But there's another intervention that's along these lines. It's called the method of shared concern. It was developed many, many years ago by Anatole Pikas and further developed by Ken Rigby of Australia. So Anatole Pikas is from Sweden. And basically, it is a situation in which bullying is suspected. It's not one in which you have to report bullying, but we all know those situations where we kind of know stuff is going on and we just wish we could stop it. And there's actually found a way to intervene in it before you have to report it. Because remember, when you report it, you need all sorts of documentation. So if we sense this, if we can catch it, nip it in the bud, so to speak, we might be able to get further. Basically 4 phases, and you'll notice it says the word modified here because there's another phase which is about the bully and the victim getting together. Far too complicated, far too risky. I don't think worth the time and effort. But basically, this is very quickly what it is. Phase 1, you meet with those that you suspect of bullying. Phase 2, you meet with the student who's wrongly done by. Phase 3, you continue to meet with the ones that are the bully suspects, and you follow up with the student who's wrongly done by. Now, what you want to do is you want to identify a situation where you think, okay, these are the people that are doing this. You want to know, okay, who are the keys, who are the players, and you want to make sure that it doesn't seem apparent that it is the student who's the victim or wrongly done by who has told us, because you'll see in the intervention you want to actually act as if you're just kind of wondering about something. So you don't want them to think that the victim has ratted on them. Each student is seen individually, starting with the suspected ringleader. And you invite them in with a non-blaming, sincere attitude where you're just basically saying to them, I'm worried about Tom. I'm worried about Mary. I hear some students have been giving him a hard time. Now, you know this is probably the ringleader, but you're not going to give away what you know. Because what you want to do is you want to try and bring that person around to expressing some kind of a concern. So what you want to do is you want to transform this into a shared concern. And again, you've got to be very subtle about this. You kind of have to prepare yourself because you have to say, do you know something about this? And I'll tell you, I have 2 colleagues, and I'll share in a moment their evaluation of it. They actually did this. They said to a kid, and they knew this was the kid who was the ringleader, and they said, what do you know about this? And the kid said, oh yeah, the other kids are bullying him. Oh, really? My goodness. And so you ask, like, do you know what's happening? Do you know anything about it? I mean, how do you see what's happening? And again, the beauty of this is you're appealing to the alpha instincts. And of course, both Kathy and Bernard, I think it was Kathy who was doing the interview. She said, Eva, I had to keep my face really, like, I had to kind of pretend, because she said, I knew he was doing it, but he blamed his friends. And she said, I had to kind of not, oh, it's the other kids. Oh my goodness. And then, so you're warm, you're empathetic, you believe, you believe that there's just a dynamic that's happening here, and that they have a desire. We really want to understand what's going on, and you really want to believe that they can change their behavior. And so you hope that you can reach a turning point, and the turning point, all the student needs to say, in Kathy's case, this kid said, well, yeah, the other kids are bullying. He knows there's a bullying situation. And then she said to him, you know, what do you think will help? Should I talk to the other kids? And he kind of looked at her and she said, I've already talked to the other kids and they don't understand. And she said, what do you think we could do? And he looked at her and he said, I'll talk to them. And again, she had to really keep her face straight because she said, and she said, oh, really? And why do you think they'll listen to you? Miss, they'll listen to me. But you see, now he's hooked in. And just that little bit of acknowledgement that he saw that the other kids, that he's willing to help. And so then this is the turning point. And now we say, well, what could you do? And in this case, he said, I'm going to talk to those kids and I'm going to make them stop. Absolutely. Great. We don't say anything about the fact that he was the one that was actually making them start. and we express approval. Okay, great, thank you very much. We could maybe suggest something if the kid is, do you think you could try next time to just say hello to him, or, just a little something, a tiny little change in behavior. And then we say, you know what? This is not necessarily easy to do. I'll see you in a couple of days and you tell me how this is going. And again, what are we doing? We're developing a caring relationship with this kid, and he doesn't even know what we're doing. Then you meet with the remaining students individually, and steps 1 to 4, just as I described, are repeated. Again, no threats, no warnings. We just ask them. And I figure this is like a kaleidoscope. If there's 5 kids involved in it and everybody just changes a little bit, the experience will be different for the child. And then, of course, we need to keep monitoring it. Then we meet with the child who is wrongly done by afterwards. Okay, express our sympathy and support over what's been happening. Let them know, you know what, I'm dealing with this. I've been talking to some other kids, and the kid actually might sometimes at that point say, no, no, don't talk to them. No, no, it's okay. Don't worry, don't worry. He doesn't. I'm not letting them know that you've said anything to me. Don't worry. I'm taking care of this. It'll be okay. We all know though that some of these kids actually make life worse for themselves. So this is our opportunity to say, do you think you could do this differently, or do you think you could do that differently? Like, we try and get them out of the way so that they don't walk into the bullying situation and make it worse. And then we're going to meet again soon. Don't worry, I'm going to follow up and see how things are doing. And then you do your follow-up meetings, and both with the individuals that are the suspects and with the student who's wrongly done by. And again, it's amazing how this can work. Rigby says, of course, it's a mild case. This is way too much. You can do it much more casually, or in a very serious case, or when a violent act has happened, or when the situation has been reported. But this is for those gray area situations. Now, this is what Kathy Morrow and Bernard Peter Hamilton, both of whom are now retired from Eastern Township School Board, said to me about this, because they said, yeah, it takes time. But so does reporting a bullying incident take time, because to try and figure out who did what to whom and whether it really was bullying. In the case of those girls, this was just before the legislation came in, but I could see how even with the legislation, this would not have helped, because the parents of those girls basically said, well, she's not a victim. She's been victimizing our girls. She's being mean to our girls. Well, of course the girl reacted. So you can't win. You can't win. So better to work behind the scenes. So yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes a lot of work to figure out how to do it. This is not natural for us. And I'm going to show you, I've got all sorts of resources where you can watch videotapes of people doing it, so you can basically practice it. You have to do the follow-up, but when they actually asked the students afterwards whether this intervention was effective, everybody said it was effective, even the ones that were involved in the inappropriate behavior. They wanted to have the follow-up. They were happy, because remember, especially when the bully pulls other kids in, these kids who are being pulled in are feeling guilty, but they don't know how to get out of it. And the adult stepping in helps them to get out of it. And it built relationships for future interventions. Kathy and Peter both said they had circumstances where the kid who was so hard to reach, when they followed this process, they would walk into the school, because they both had many schools that they worked in. They would walk into the school and this kid would come running to them. Orienting towards the adults. That is what's going to undo what's happening with the bully. As I mentioned, there's a book that's been written about it. There's a DVD. It's really hard to get a hold of because it's from Australia. But there are also some recordings that are on the web. So these are all in your handout, and we'll put them up on our page on bullying as well, where you can watch and see how to do this. Honestly, if I was going to spend a whole lot of time and energy, I would rather spend the time and energy on figuring out how to become a good intervener for the method of shared concern, than to spend all that time on organizing a one-day intervention, which really isn't going to make a difference. When we're looking at the unmaking of a bully, we're talking about right relationships and soft hearts. Again, if you want to know more about this, Dr. Neufeld has a whole chapter. He has a whole course as well. And we have now on our website, and I'm going to give Catherine a moment, in just a quick moment, just let you know, remember, it's on our main page under members, The password for the members is CEBM members. When you get there, you go under challenges and you find the bullying problems, and then you'll find a page in which we have, and we're going to be putting more resources. And just before I pass it on to Catherine, I just want to remind you there is an evaluation. So at the end of the session, Catherine will post it into the chat box. Please fill it in or fill it in from our website. And remember that we'll be back together again on the 3rd of February and looking at what's behind the behavior. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Catherine, I'm going to ask you to
Eva.
share and
Yes.
just quickly show people where to find some more resources.
Terrific.
And at that moment, if you guys just want to type in some questions, be happy to.
And so as Eva mentioned, and so from the main website, if you click onto members, it should bring up the other website, and then you just type in the password and it should pop up this way. Into under challenges, it's the last one, bullying problems. So you click onto here, and then we just have an introduction paragraph, and then you'll get into the part 1 and part 2 that Eva presented in December, and the one of today. We'll be able to add the recording after we're done this evening. You've got the handouts that are here. And then Eva, I don't know if you wanted to speak quickly to the blueprint that you have there, and that's the 2x2 the 2x10, sorry, that you had spoken of.
Yes, there's a write-up about the 2x10. This blueprint is just basically it's a whole booklet of suggestions of things that schools can do that basically work at developing right relationships with kids. So a whole variety of different things that make students feel like they want to attach to the adults in the school. So
wonderful. Yeah. And then a few editorials. They're so great. 3 of them are from Deborah McManara, and I actually added a 4th one from Alfie Cohen on bullying. And so if you want to go and take a look, they're available right here. And since I am on the website, I just wanted to show really quickly for the question that we had earlier about all of the other presentations that Eva's done this year. So this is the homepage of our public site. If you continue scrolling down, we've got upcoming events, but then after the upcoming events, we've got events that we've done from the beginning of the year, which is the launch of the members site, and so forth. And so you've got, if you click to watch the recording, and then you can download the handout, and the survey is here as well. You've got for the presentations, the ones that will be coming up, we've got some until June. We'll continue to add them on to this page. Exactly. Eva, anything else before I stop sharing?
No, just a quick reminder for those of you that work at the school board level, we have a session as well. So just check our website for that session. Alrighty, I don't know if there are any questions.
There is, so I will go and read. Here we go. What do you do if the bully doesn't want to participate in activities like lunch activities, or interested in helping with younger students?
Yeah, there's a continued.
And then, yes, and then they go on to say this is one particular student in grade 4 won't help or won't want to be separated from his peers to help with K students.
Okay, so now honestly, you're dealing with a difficult case there, because very often this is a person who's very peer attached. If they're not with their peers, they don't feel right. They don't. Yes. So you have to, again, find different ways. Just see what you can find in terms of there's something else we can do with them. It's really a very, very big challenge, because remember, the bully dynamic basically says, I won't let you take care of me. I'm going to take care of myself. And then they get themselves into all sorts of trouble. So we have to be very creative. This is where often your team needs to get together. Sometimes you need someone like, you just need someone on the team that the student can relate to. Just find some ways. But there's no easy answers for these. These are very, very tricky situations. And when we're talking elementary, it's already hard enough. By the time we get to secondary and all the stuff that's happening on social media, it can become a nightmare. It can become a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and she says, or take care of my friends. This is where most of the bullying happens.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and some of these kids, they have such a strong alpha complex that they actually will bully other kids. You know, if they do get attached to their group, there's some level of loyalty there. They will then take it upon themselves to hurt other kids to protect their friends. I mean, it can get very, very complex. But if we keep remembering, the mantra of the bully is, I will take care of myself, so no one will hurt me. That's the mantra of the bully. And our come back to that has to be inside of our head. Oh, what can we do to help this young person feel like some adults are on their side? But it can take 2 or 3 years sometimes. I don't know, Catherine, if you.
Well, I was just going to say the other piece too is I think that they're very attuned to picking up from us whether or not our proposals that we do are authentic or not. And so I wonder if that's proposition that you had, the 2x10, which starts off with something that's very kind of non-threatening. There's no expectation. It's just about connecting in a very genuine way, that hopefully if the student can be hooked in, that slowly but surely getting the student to help out is that if there is that rapport with that adult that did the check-in with the student, is asking for help. So it's not that we have a hidden agenda that's obvious, where we're telling them that they need to go there for a specific reason. It's more that we're asking for them to help us out. Sometimes that appeals to their alpha instinct to want to help out the adult that that is there to
But first they have to be attached
attention
to the adult.
Correct.
Yes, and that might take time.
100%.
These kids do not attach very well to adults.
No,
they don't. You'll watch them, and again, it's yeah, you'll often watch them. They pay attention to the adults so they don't get into trouble. Because there is, I don't know what it is about these kids that sort of are part of that bully dynamic. They kind of know how to stay out of trouble, enough trouble, but of course they get into other trouble. But it's, it's that protective, I guess that sensitivity that allows them to kind of be good when they have to be good, but not because they want to be good, right? And you often, so it's a long journey. If you can pick kids up like that around grade 2 or grade 3, your goal is to hope by grade 4 or grade 5 that they'll start at least attaching to 1 or 2 adults in the school.
I'll never forget a year that I was working at St. Raphael. One of the students had said to a staff member, "Well, of course you're being nice to me. You're paid to be nice to me." And the way that they were able to get the students to open up was actually through the caretaker, because in their mind, the caretaker didn't have a need to be nice because it was not part of the job description. It was about to take care of the building, right? Some very witty, huh? Sometimes they pick up on these subtleties.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was that student, but I know one of the St. Raphael stories was a kid who was having a really horrible time, and at this point was past the bullying, was into just melting down. And the caretaker walked up the stairs and walked into the hallway, and the kid took one look at the caretaker and just dashed and ran into his arms.
Oh, it's so lovely.
I mean, oh yeah, exactly. So yes, try and use as many other people around as you can. And again, it's just always thinking, we've got to get through to this kid. Now there is a question.
Yes, there is. So where and when do consequences come into play for the bully? What about equipping victims with assertive communication?
Okay, so what we need to remember is that the consequences are not for the bully. When we impose a consequence around behavior that's unacceptable, because again, I guess there's that line. When you've crossed the line for reporting, we've basically lost the situation. By the time you do the reporting thing, according to whatever I don't remember what the law is, N56 or L56.
Oh, the Bill 56.
Bill 56. By the time you've done that, you have lost any hope of intervening in the situation. It's gotten into the adult's hands. So you might say, if a child is doing an act which looks like bullying, and you might say out loud to everybody, that is completely inappropriate behavior. Kevin, you come with me right now. Okay. That's to tell the other kids, I see what's going on here. I'm going to do something about it. But when Kevin walks into the office, if you say to him, now you're going to have this consequence. Now you can't go out for recess. Now you can't go out at lunchtime. Now you can't do this. Now you can't do that. I'm going to tell your mother, blah, blah. You're never going to get Kevin, ever. It's just going to harden him more. And he's just going to find another place to do it where you won't notice. The minute Kevin walks in, you have to go, oh my goodness, things are not working for you today. And it's really hard to do because we hate it when other kids. Now he might say, you're not going to give me a consequence? Oh, well, I'm probably going to have to do something. You know what the rules of the school are. What do you think I should do? If he says he thinks if they think, oh yeah, wow, what do you think I should do? But again, we are like managing that alpha dynamic is so tricky. So yeah, and equipping the victims with assertive communication. Well, as Dr. Neufeld says very succinctly, yes, in that moment, that victim can stop that behavior in that moment, but it isn't going to stop the bully. The bully will just find another place to do it, another victim to do it with, another weaker, vulnerable kid. So we protect that's why I said, like, yes, we can give certain scripts to our victims, but first of all, don't think that that's going to stop the bully. And secondly, just be very careful because it could backfire.
That's what I was going to say. It's not all bullies that back down. For some of them, they see this as an invitation for more, and it could up the ante. Actually, it could backfire.
Yes. And most kids know that, by the way. Most kids kind of are aware that there's and again, it's interesting because it's such an instinctive thing. There are kids kind of know sometimes just in their stomach how scary that bully is. Yeah, there are some kids that kind of get into the bully. That's why we call it the bully instinct versus the bully syndrome. Kids are just more in the instinct part. You could probably kind of deal with it a little bit that way, but there are some kids you don't want to cross them. You do not want to cross them, and in your stomach. And again, as adults, we all know when we've run across an adult bully, we don't want to talk back to that bully because we know instinctively it could hurt us.
You had spoken about this, Eva, in part 1 of the presentation, where you talked about the brain and the instinct, and how when there isn't defenses, we can pick up about hierarchy and feeling the threat, but that reality still happens even if you're in the bully instinct. All of these reactions to the brain still happen, but in the defensive mode, so then they'll pick up anybody who's trying to out what's the term, to put them out of their position. Displace them, that becomes a threat. Earlier, you mentioned showing discipline in public, and then precise softening once solo, one-on-one with the child. How do you see the actual application of a proper consequence?
There is the message you have to have, and I'm sorry I'm being so definitive about it. The bottom line is there is no consequence that will get the bully to do better, and consequences will make the bully worse. Now, do you manage the situation? Absolutely. Absolutely. You might have to say, if bullying always happens out in the hallway, out in the corridor, you might say to the bully, you know what? During lunchtime, this is what I'm going to do. Now, that'll feel like a consequence to the bully, but it's the same thing. During lunchtime, you close the door, and bit by bit, you try and make life, pleasant for the bully, create relationships, whatever. So you manage the situation, but consequences only make the bully syndrome worse, and they never cure the bully syndrome. They might cure inappropriate behavior, but not the bully syndrome.
Clarification about Bill 56. So the element 2 of Bill 56 are preventative measures for all stakeholders. I want to take a moment to inform participants that Bill 56 is not only for reactive measures, but also proactive as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm all for proactive. But my understanding is that there comes a time in which the flag is dropped, and there is a whole process that needs to be gone into, because bullying has become formalized. And my thing is that when bullying has become formalized, it's very rare. It can be done. It's not all hope is lost. It can be done, but then you often get the adults entrenched. No, just like those parents of that girl, of those girls. My girls aren't bullies. She's just as bad. You can't prove that my girls did bullying. When could you prove that? No, she fought back. No, this is just, it becomes I don't know. And I have talked to administrators who have said to me that when they go down that rabbit hole, it takes a huge amount of their time. It has to happen when it is obvious, public, clear knowledge that one child is hurting other children. Of course, we have to take action. And I'm not against Bill 56 for that reason. It says to everybody, we are taking this stuff seriously. I'm just saying that the chances of kind of doing the therapeutic work are less once you've crossed that line, because it takes so much of everybody's time to do the next bits of it. So yeah. Anyway,
someone writes, and what someone says, so in essence, it's all about rehabilitating the bully and to try to stop the behaviors to stop over time.
Over time, exactly. And I see, thanks, Justine. I see that it was Justine who wrote about Bill 56. I am going to actually be meeting with all of the people that are responsible at the school board levels for managing the anti-bullying, anti-violence. I don't know. I know there's different names for that. I'm sorry, Justine, if you could, but we're going to talk about this more. And there are no easy answers. There's no one solution fits all. But I think that, I mean, I've been involved with schools for 45 years. And we have done, I tried for the last 22 of them to work on the bullying dossier. And until I got this understanding, we keep putting more and more things in place. And they, unfortunately, and right now, and I'm just going to end on this, and I'm sorry, it's probably not the most positive note to end on, but the reality is, with everything being somewhat disrupted right now, children are having a hard time. And the most important thing I think that we're going to need to do in the next 2 or 3 weeks when we bring our children back to school is to remember that they are looking to us for a sense of security. And we need to give them that. Somebody was reminding me today that, when we bring the kids back now, it's as if it's August again. So do what you would do in August. Welcome all the kids back. Make it safe. Make it easy for them to behave properly. Redo your routines. Ease them into the work. I know it would be so easy to want to just go barreling ahead because the end of the year is coming, but take 2 weeks to set that tone again, so that kids can say, okay, the adults are taking care of us. And once they see that, things will come down. But unfortunately, is a very disruptive time in the world, and so we have to be very, very kind and helpful and supportive of our children who are struggling in a world where everything is shifting. And I know it is for you as well. So I really appreciate those of you that have been able to find
Thank
the
you.
time to come.
I included the link for the survey. We would really appreciate for you to take a moment. It's a few clicks to be able to fill that out. Thank you very much for your time this evening.